Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Playing World of Tanks. I'm AJ, and today we'll be looking at a game that I had in my Object 430 version 2, which is the Russian Tier 9 medium tank. Now we will talk about the tank in more in-depth later on, but let's talk about Stalingrad as a map. Now it is a very unique map in the fact that the north area or in the west areas are mostly city fighting, in which little to no gun depression is actually required, whereas the eastern part of the map is predominantly open area, wide expanse with a ridge that sort of like requires a lot of gun depression to fight well. Now if you have seen one of the previous videos on this channel, namely the Centurion Mark 1, I generally tend to go with my tanks which have gun depression and good turrets towards the eastern side of the map, and also medium tanks. The reason for that choice is that the medium tanks require space to maneuver, which the eastern side provides, though the northern side does have a lot of buildings. The room for maneuvering is pretty slim, so you're going to be fighting really frontally with a lot of heavy tanks, and that's not a best case scenario for a medium tank to be up against. Second thing you want to keep in mind is ridges are your friends if you have good gun depression. If you have bad gun depression, they are not your friends. So things like the 1-to-1 sort of like break the mold, in which it is a medium tank, but I would rather still take it west where gun depression is not a necessity. So one of the main reasons for taking the Object 430 east this, even though I was talking about the fact that you need gun depression to fight, is the fact that how the team split initially. Most of our tanks were congregated towards the west side of the map. They decided to go in that direction, whereas there's very few tanks who were guarding the eastern flank. So me and my platoon decided that the right thing to do was to go hold the eastern flank together with the Waffle and one other scout on our team. Now here in the battle, we are somewhat overcommitted to this flank. We kind of like realize it a little late, but we should have stayed further back in a more defensive position or posture, where we could have drawn the enemy into a narrow field of fire where all of our guns would be more effective. What that translates to essentially in this game is that we should have fallen further back and used the city as sort of like a defense, where we could just shoot at the enemy, retreat, shoot at the enemy, and retreat further back. This allows you to sort of like take little to no shots, because every time the enemy has to pop forward, you are able to put a shot into them, and then you retreat behind cover again, and then the process just repeats itself over and over again. Now here we collapse on the T-34, which the enemy team just left by himself, and there's nothing he can do against 2 Tier 9 medium tanks that swarm him. Over here the enemies also make the first mistake in that they actually kind of surrounded us if you look at the map, yet they decide to push into the city and just ignore us, which comes to bite them later on in the game. Though it didn't cost us our tanks at the moment, I guess our overcommitment coupled with the enemies just ignoring us when they had us surrounded just saved our tanks at that moment. And once we take out the T-34, the correct move to do is actually move towards the enemy base and hide behind the ridge. Because the reason is, even though we are in somewhat fast tanks, they will catch up eventually. So what we need to do at this point is hold off the enemies that are going to come back. And there are some that are going to come back realizing that there's 2 tanks alive behind them. Some of them are going to turn around and try to deal with us. Now the SU-152 is actually not equipped with the derp gun, which I was kind of afraid of, and the reason for that is if he's firing HE rounds, even though they will not pen, they will do significant module damage. The other mistake I make here is the IS-3. Now the IS-3 doesn't have the top gun, which means he can't actually pen me easily. So what I should have done was backed off to the point where his gun could not actually point down into my engine deck, and should have locked him there. Instead, I back up further, allowing him to shoot straight down into the engine deck, which gives him easy penetrating shots on my tank. But again, that's one of the disadvantages of playing the Object 430 version 2, is that with the rear mounted turret you sometimes can't decide how you're going to approach certain tanks or certain situations. So I prioritized taking the SU-152 out of the game, And one of the ways you can do that is actually hug one of the tanks completely as to block the second tank from firing at you, and that's what I do. I hug the IS-3 to block the SU-152 from taking another shot at me. And then I realized the error of my ways, back up, open the distance, and take out the IS-3 where his gun is not going to be as effective. Now the enemy already bravely comes up and actually shotguns my platoon mate, which leaves only me against the Tiger II. I was not going to let the enemy already escape just because I didn't want to worry about a tank behind me, so I turned around and actually shoot him as well. One of the other decisions I make at this time is to load heat rounds just because I don't have that much health anymore and I cannot afford to bounce shots like I did on the IS-3 or the Tiger II. I need to pin all my shots now, and since the Tiger II isn't actually side on against me, and the heat selection actually does make sense at this point. Now over here, the SU-101 also comes to join the party. Unfortunately for him, he doesn't have enough health, and I just tap him enough where I take out the rest of his health without actually needing to fire a shot. The disadvantage to doing that is I got tracked, which gave the Tiger II an easy shot in my engine deck, which pinned and actually did damage. So that reduces me to about one shot of damage for almost anything left on this on the enemy team. Now over here, since I'm actually not using mods, I do not know how much health does the T-30 or the T-54E1 have. The other problem is that I was told by my platoon mate that the T-54E1 is fairly healthy, so I am just one shot for both of them. So this required me to sort of like know beforehand where the T-54E1 was and the T-30 were, because if they do manage to ambush me, I'm pretty much dead. But if I know their position ahead of time, I can prepare a defense against both of them. And that was my reasoning for like going into the enemy cap, because I was thinking that the T-54E1 is still coming for me since he wasn't spotted for a while. However, with the death of our already and the last player on our team, now I know exactly where both of the enemy tanks are, and judging from how they're moving, I'm guessing they're gonna start capping the base fairly soon. And now what I do is I rush to not the first corner that I see where I can intercept them, but to the second corner and prepare to side scrape. Now over here, the more dangerous gun is the T-30, which thank God did not have a lot of health at this point. Also, if you notice, I switched back to AP rounds, because if you're going to be firing at the side of the tanks, chances are heat rounds have a really good chance of actually just being absorbed by the track of the enemy vehicle. So I switched back to AP rounds to make sure that I actually pen my shots. Now here, the enemy T-54E1 has the right idea. He wants to rush me down, and he knows he has the hit point advantage. What I need to do is slow him down, and so I track him, and he prepares, and luckily enough I track him again. Which the other crucial thing is I've bounced 3 shells from the T-54E1. Since he was not holding his shots, that only leaves 1 shell in the drum, and the last shot manages to take him out. Now hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode of Playing World of Tanks.